So hello everyone and welcome to today's Business Mastery Series webinar. They are brought to you twice a month by the wonderful people at Direct Pay. My name is Carol Vickers and together with Liz Christofferson, we at Empower Consulting Group have had the privilege of hosting these webinars this past couple of years. It's been an honor to meet some amazing presenters and to participate in some very lively discussions and some great learning. Direct Pay, as I'm sure all of you are aware, is committed to the success of small business entrepreneurs like ourselves. Through their great customer service team, you can learn how to increase your business's growth and sales. But you can also contact them for information on not just credit card acceptance and online shopping carts, but mobile payments too. And you can speak to a real person, which is just an amazing thing in today's world. You can call them or contact them directly. And at the address www.directpayinc.com. That's directpayinc.com. And you will be able to get in touch with a real person who will get back to you right away. Direct Pay's Business Mastery Series is designed to provide learning and education for business development for your organization. These opportunities to learn from some of the top minds in business today are just so incredibly worthwhile. And today we have another chance to learn from one of the best. I've had the opportunity to speak with Nancy Snell a few times as we were preparing for this webinar, and I have to tell you what a pleasure it has been to be in her presence online. Nancy is a certified, credentialed business and executive productivity coach, working with entrepreneurs, managers, business owners, and professionals of all types who are feeling distracted and want help prioritizing, planning, and managing their time and tasks. She helps her clients stop feeling overloaded and stressed every day so they can get a better handle on managing everything that has to get done with way more ease and way less stress. The goal is to reduce overwhelm and increase productivity. Her clients are all dealing with work-related challenges such as effectively handling the onslaught of information, attempting to get organized, inconsistent follow-through, difficulty delegating and managing multiple projects, and overall attempts to optimize their time. I'm sure all of us can recognize one of those traits in our daily world. Nancy teaches sustainable planning skills, systems, and accountability required to stay focused and effective in today's fast-paced world of competing priorities. She's been an executive productivity coach and business consultant for the past 10 years, building her company to six figures, which she is now rebranding to the Distractive Executive Inc. Prior to that, she worked corporately in broadcasting, sales, marketing, media, buying, which included mentoring, training, and new business development. That experience taught her, among many other things, how to be accountable and get fast, laser-focused, great results. Additionally, on top of all this, she has a subspecialization in comprehensive expertise in the field of adult ADHD, where her experience and best practices uniquely qualify her to work with business professionals of all stripes and colors, ADHD or not. And these people are all inundated with information and overwhelm that is decreasing their ability to be as productive and profitable as they are capable of being. She's all about optimizing efficiency and productivity. Once a client starts working with Nancy, they immediately feel more in control because they experience themselves successfully tackling everything that has to get done. Her new blog site, www.thedistractedexecutive.com, is a new rebranding for Nancy, and we will make sure that that is up and available for you to get in touch with her later on. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please pop them into the chat, and I will make sure that Nancy gets an opportunity to manage questions at the end of our presentation. And also, if you have any challenges or technical difficulties, pop that into the chat, as I will be managing the presentation in the background. So for now, I'm just going to pass you on to Nancy and say welcome, Nancy Snell.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for taking time out of what I imagine are your busy days and schedules to show up here for an hour. And my hope is that you take away at least one thing. If you take away one thing that you didn't know before, it's been a tremendous use and great use of your time. So what we're going to focus on today is, as we said in our promotions, learning strategies you can use immediately to think more clearly, to plan more purposefully, to work with focused intention to get the results that you want, to work on the technology to master your to-do list, reduce some distraction, overwhelm, and procrastination, which we all feel, and get a little, we're going to be talking about some strategies around getting organized and learn how to prioritize and stay on top of what for so many of us is this completely unwieldy tsunami, as I like to call it, and workload. So the truth of the matter is, let me tell you a little bit about my own journey and how I came to be doing this work. So ever since I was a little girl, I have been fascinated by people and the unconscious and what makes us all tick. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology and actually always thought I wanted to be a therapist. Of course, it wasn't until about 12 or 13 years ago that I heard about coaching and intuitively knew that that's what I wanted to do. And I've always been in the time business in one form or another. As Carol mentioned, I was in broadcasting. I had, for over 20 years, I had a very successful career buying and selling media, TV time, which was a pretty wild and crazy business. And also that involved new business development. And eventually I got into mentoring as well. And during this time, I was raising a bright, busy 8-year-old daughter who I saw was a mirror image of myself, actually. She was constantly in motion. She was happy. She was struggling with focus sometimes. She was very social, and she would get very easily bored. And I eventually learned that these are some of the traits that are common for ADD. And in those days, nobody ever really heard of ADD. And I looked back at myself and realized that I had the same challenges and issues. And in helping her get focused, I worked on this myself and developed systems and skills and strategies to do something about it. And then, because the truth of the matter is I'm really a very organized person and a successful person, just like all of us are. But I find over the years that and especially lately, that I have gotten more and more distracted as technology and more demands pour in. So I am experiencing, and hence the rebranding, I am experiencing myself as a distracted executive when I actually never really did before. So I'm here to provide solutions from what I have learned, in my own life experience. So 10 years ago, as I saw similarities and I saw people struggling with this, I made a commitment to address it and support business professionals, like all of us, who are constantly challenged in the overwhelming day-to-day workplace. So let's get started. So even if you don't always feel like it, and I'm making an assumption here, you are successful. You probably wouldn't have gotten as far as you have if you weren't smart and capable. And you're on this call today because in spite of that, you may sometimes be feeling overwhelmed, right, or stopped, or stressed, or ashamed even, that because you're so good at what you do, but you can't seem to get it all done. So there's a good reason for this. What's the good reason? This is a skill. Time management, prioritizing, project management come naturally to some people. But for many of us, especially today, these are skills that need to be learned and can be learned. And if no one sat you down and taught you how to do this in a way that made sense to you, not to them or to that guru or this guru, but to you, then of course you might be struggling. So we're here today to give you a core set of guidelines that can change the way you work with time and feel about your ability to complete things. Because it's all about feeling complete at the end of the day as opposed to incomplete and feeling like we always have loose ends all over the place. We're all really working hard to maintain some semblance of sanity and keep it all together. And as far as I can see, the tsunami is not stopping anytime soon. So the net is this, and I think it's really important, that it's incumbent upon each one of us individually to figure out our own personal solutions and make decisions around just what we are going to do with all of this overwhelm. Hopefully, that's why you're on the call today. So I'm going to walk you through the process I've developed and talked to hundreds of clients over the years, which is basically nothing more than a methodical approach to tackle this. And these are clients, business professionals, just like you and me, small business owners, entrepreneurs, sales managers, attorneys, accountants, marketing executives, who came to me feeling out of control, overworked, and panicking very often, feeling that they would never get caught up on their work or be able to keep up with the demands. So where they were overwhelmed and paralyzed, not even knowing where to start, once they apply some of these principles that we're going to talk about today, and we're going to, the whole idea here is to simplify. Once they start doing that, they get a little more clear on what they have to do and realistic about what they can actually get done, and they're able to get important things crossed off the list, which is what I'm sure we all want to be doing on a more routine and consistent basis. So to help you get the most out of our time together, I'd like you to keep in mind the following few things. Number one, I don't expect you to absorb and apply all of this. If you, as I said before, if you can take away a single actionable step, then you've had great success. Number two, that this is all a process. Change does not happen overnight, so it's always, as far as I'm concerned, about incremental progress in the right direction. And new habits take time, and I think that we all know that. So it's incremental progress in the right direction. Keep that in mind. And number three is you'll probably never get it all done, which is a big statement, and that's okay. There's simply too much to do. There are too many projects, articles to write, emails to return, demands, interruptions. So if you can accept the simple fact that there are more things on your to-do list than you can actually get done, you'll have jumped over a big hurdle. And then in order to manage the tsunami and stay on top of your game, ultimately there are three things that we always need to begin to internalize. When we're looking at all, the panacea of so many things that we have to do, we're going to stop, which I'm going to get into in a minute because that's the first of the 5 Ps, which is pause. But what we need to do is we need to always identify what needs to get done. If you want to write this down, actually, this is important. We want to know what needs to get done, when it needs to get done by, and when you're going to do it. What needs to get done, when it needs to get done by, and when I'm going to do it. And when you know these things, basically you're able to make purposeful choices about how you're allocating your time and work with a well thought out and thought through plan that has you actually getting things done that you want and need to get done because you've taken some time to think about it. So the 5P process or approach or methodology that we're talking about breaks this down into very specific doable steps. So what are the 5 Ps? They're pause, prioritize, process, plan, and then practice. So, and at the end of the call, we're going to give a URL for a download, so it's going to really recap a lot of this. So, you know, if you don't want to take notes, that's totally fine. Pause, in essence, is really, it's all about a big stop sign. We're always busy. We get a false sense of satisfaction and confidence even because we're accomplishing something, anything. So just because we're in action. The trouble, however, is we're very often not purposeful or mindful about what we're doing. And we're very often not doing the things that actually need to get done just because we're like clamoring to feel complete. So pause is all about stopping and thinking through. Literally stopping and thinking through in the middle of all this activity and when you're feeling a lot of anxiety and you're feeling stress and you don't even know what to do first and you're feeling overwhelmed. Prioritize is where you really get to look at all of the moving pieces in order to start making decisions. So you'll, excuse me, take a little water there. You'll get clear on the time sensitivity or due dates, you know, where there are hard deadlines. And then you can decide which tasks need to get done first, which need to be done by you, which can be delegated, and which maybe aren't going to be done at all or are going to go up on the shelf till, you know, 6 months from now. Process is really where it's essential to understand what's involved in the individual tasks and projects on your to-do list in order to be able to plan properly. In this step, you break down each goal into component parts. Very often, and this is a big aha, things remain on our list indefinitely simply because we don't realize that there's a step that needs to be taken in order to even get to the task at hand, or it's too big. I think what we find is that if I'm having trouble getting started, the first step is usually too big. So I'm all about breaking down further into baby steps, and that's how things actually get done. And this is within this process is we also procrastinate when tasks are simply too big to start. And when taken as a whole, they often are too big to sit down and do all at once. But when you break them down into small, specific steps, suddenly you find yourself moving forward on a project that may have seemed unmanageable, and before you know it, literally it gets done. And plan, which is the fourth P, is where you, now that you know, by that time you know what you need to do and when it needs to be done by, you decide when you're going to do it. And here is where we look at the steps and break each down further into baby steps. And then we get into estimating how much time each step will take. And then you will be ready to work with your calendar to determine the date. We're going to get a little bit more into each one of these in a minute. So remember that everything we have to do needs a real time slot to do it in, literally. And your calendar will become your new best friend. My calendar is my best friend. I look at it a bazillion times a day. I interact with it. I move things around. It's a blueprint for my day, my week, my month, my everything. It really can be the center of a new approach to time and your new relationship with getting things done. And the calendar is really the fulcrum of the wheel, the hub, if you will. So the fifth P is practice, which is really about, you know, baby steps and about putting these things that we're learning and taking these new concepts and having the willingness to start implementing them a little bit at a time. And this way we start to internalize these strategies, and we're operating and executing very differently. And it's really a lot of freedom. It takes a lot of weight off of my shoulders when I have that calendar and when I've been planning routinely and I've been thinking about what I'm doing. It really does. So let's go back to P. When I first introduced the concept of pausing, let's go back to pause, I meant to say. When I first introduced the concept of pausing, there's often resistance. Why? Because people who are already cramming more than they can fit into a day cannot imagine taking time away from what they're doing to just stop and sit and think. But when you're spinning your wheels, there's nothing better to do than pause, meaning slow down to ultimately go faster. Because a time management, effective time management or time optimization, handling and managing the time we have, we can't plan on the fly. We need to stop and actually do a little bit of thinking and planning in order to execute effectively. Like, for example, you know you have a meeting at 2 o'clock, right? But you haven't thought through what you have to do to prepare for the meeting. And maybe you have to write an agenda or think through a new strategy that you're going to present or speak to a colleague, print a sell sheet. You get the idea. So when you're planning on the fly, you're not considering these things, and you're not leaving yourself enough time, and you're stressed, and you feel like a wreck half of the time. So planning on the fly equals no plan, equals anxiety. So pause is about stopping. It's a great opportunity to halt the frenzy and regain control before impulsively and compulsively taking action after action. And the byproduct is we have a sense of feeling complete at the end of the day, and that's really a beautiful thing. Let me give you a great example of how pause can work effectively. I was working with a client who was a real estate executive. He was in a job that, shall we say, was less than satisfying. And he had been procrastinating getting his resume revised. No excuses, but this guy was literally so inundated with work and distractions all day long, every day, that he almost had no time to breathe or even grab lunch. And he was exhausted. So what we did was we observed that he was also additionally doing everything but what he needed to do to take care of himself. And once he was willing to pause, to just stop and ask himself a few simple questions like, what's the first thing I need to do? He realized that it was all about simply just stopping to do the first step, which was to find the old paperwork of his old resume. And what he did then was, by recognizing that, he committed to a time to stop and look for it, and he actually accomplished it. And the reality is, by pausing, he called the resume person, and he not only had a new resume, but 3 interviews set up within 3 weeks of the pause. So had he not stopped, you know, it was much more simple than what was going on in his head. And one of my favorite strategies in pause is called what I like to call a brain dump. It's the first thing I do with my clients when they're feeling paralyzed and overwhelmed and don't know where to start. It's really to have them do a brain dump. And it's so interesting because it becomes so second nature after a while. So what we do is we just get out a piece of paper and we consolidate and capture in no particular order all the things buzzing around in their head in that day. It's not a to-do list. It's just really, you know, to intervene on overwhelm in that day in real time when it's happening. It's a low-tech solution that works every time. So you might look at this and say, no way, Jose, I don't know how, what is she, crazy? How can it possibly all get done? But the number of things that get done is not going to change simply because you write them down. So they're all floating around anyway, and at least now they're in one place and we can systematically begin to look at them. And so that's in pause. And from there we focus on prioritizing tasks. So you get clear on what the most important items are, and then can put your time and energy to what's needed most. So how often do you randomly pick things off of your to-do list and just impulsively start taking action? I know I do that. I have to pull myself back from doing that. I think we all do. What happens when we do that, however, is that some things get done, but they're not always and often the important ones, the ones that really have serious consequences if we don't complete them. So the purpose of prioritizing is to assess the items that are on the to-do list or the brain dump. I'll use them interchangeably in terms of time sensitivity, hard deadlines, due dates, before ultimately syncing with a calendar. We look at what's time sensitive. Do you really have to do that thing now? You know, are there things you want to put, as we said before, in your someday folder? And the next steps are going to be about baby steps and breaking things down, which is really where we get into processing, which is the third P. A lot of stress comes from the anxiety of free-floating ideas and unknown quantities. So when your head is filled with things you have to do and you keep remembering more of them and you don't have any idea how long they'll actually take, it's really easy to freeze up if you think about it. It very often feels impossible, like there's no way I'm going to get it done. And it might be. I mean, these days it's very probable that I'm not going to get it all done, especially when I think I should or I'm supposed to, because it's virtually impossible. But the point that we're talking about here is until you actually lay everything on the table, break it down into specific steps, and understand what kind of time, effort, and resources are involved, you really won't know what you have on your plate or where to start or how to do it. Why? Because being specific rather than living in vagueness always, and I underline, always reduces stress. So here in process is where we start breaking things down into baby steps and one by one estimating how long they'll take so that we can be realistic about creating a plan of action. Hope this is making sense. Every deliverable, every transaction, everything I do, from mailing a letter to hiring a new assistant, involves one or more actions. And although at first glance, the process of taking time to think through all of this and writing it out can seem cumbersome and even ridiculous, it's very counterintuitive for busy, successful people. You'll find that it's well worth the investment. And why? Because this will help you become deliberate and less impulsive and way, 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 way more effective. So once I figure out what the steps are, I can estimate how long it might take me to do it. For example, decide on vacation is written on your to-do list. You likely don't even realize how many steps there are. So until you dismantle it and get clear on the steps, you might even not make it on vacation. Or if you do, it will be a much more stressful process than it has to be. Another example, we might all have is proposal is due on 7/17. I'm making that up. So this is typical of a bigger project with many moving parts. It's the same deal. It's the same concept. So the first step is to break it way down. For example, it might be, we say, what do I need to do to review the project? Okay, review notes from client meetings. Outline client wishes and intended income. Talk to Maxine about a budget. Determine the format for the video. Research the competitive statistics. Whatever the details are. And as you do this and you say to yourself, okay, what else do I need to do? What else do I need to do? Not when am I doing it, we're not up to that yet, but what else do I need to do? You want to get all of these steps broken down to the lowest common denominator. And remember, this is all part of the planning phase that must occur before ultimately attempting to integrate these tasks with the white spaces on the calendar. What are white spaces? I always like to talk about white space. That's the time when you're looking at your planner or your calendar where there's nothing there yet. So everything else is a commitment once it's on the calendar. Everything else is an anchor. It's not random. It's not on there because it's a wish list. It's something that has come out of this process that is now on the calendar. And it's sort of, I always like to call it sacred space. So once it's on the calendar, it's really there for a very good reason. It's not random if you're doing this process the way you want to be doing this process. So the next step in process is to estimate how long each of these individual steps will take. And this will allow you to be clear and realistic when it's time to start placing tasks literally on the calendar. So you'll look at each item and make an educated guess about how long it will take. You might want to think, okay, have I done something like this before? To my best of my knowledge, how long did it take? And for many of us, as we're learning the skills to estimate time and get a better time sense, be gentle with yourself because it's all an experiment. It's all a learning laboratory. And you have to just, there's no such thing, as I said before. There's no such thing as perfection. This is all a process. So let's see now. Okay, so what I want to talk about with regards to that is about the X factor. So I would like you to do yourself a big favor. One of the most critical things that I've found in learning to estimate time is to remember to add the X factor, which very conservatively is 25%. So just make an assumption that things will take you 25% more time than you think they will. Just make the assumption that things will take you 25% more time than you think they will. And it's usually more than that, especially at the beginning. And it's always better to do that. Why? Because then we have time. We bought ourselves time as opposed to being depressed because we couldn't get everything done on time. So always be conservative in your estimates and schedule more time, as I said, than you think things are going to take, and account for that. Why? Because so often there are, as we all know, there's spontaneously emerging disruptions. There are a million interruptions. There are calls, there are meetings, a big one is technology frustration and aggravation, the computer crashes, God knows what goes on. And this is part of our day-to-day life, these kinds of malfunctions and breakdowns all the time. So we want to factor it in so we don't get completely freaked out on a day-to-day basis when these things are happening anyway, which they do. So here's a really good example of how we break things down and how we have something on our list that might be where we might not be being realistic. So we might have review resumes on our list, right? So what do we want to do? We want to concretize the time that it will take to get this project done, the baby steps. So ask yourself, for example here, how many resumes do I have on my desk to review? So it could be 10, it could be 30. You know, you have just review resumes. I think this is a really good exercise. So see, you first want to know how many you have, right? Are there 10 or are there 30 or are there 50? So then you want to ask yourself approximately how long will it take me to review one? Is it going to take 5 minutes or 10 minutes? So let's say you think it will take 7 minutes to review a resume. So we're going to bump that now up by 25% for the X factor, which will bring you to about 10 minutes per resume. So if you have 30 resumes to review, that will take you 300 minutes. That means that there are 5 hours of work that need to be scheduled over the next week to meet that deadline. And another thing to consider is whether you might receive additional resumes during the week. If so, you know, add on some extra time so you have flexibility if more come in. But this is a great example of how to take something that is vague and concretize it and make it very real. Okay, so you may start to freak out a little bit, you know, and because there's a lot of stuff that we're talking about here, and you may be looking at how long everything's going to take and be thinking, she's crazy, there's no way I have this much time, which is, as I said before, it's okay, it's very normal, in fact. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at how to handle it in the next P, which is plan. So, okay, remember how I've said that everything we have to do needs a time slot to do it in. So now that we've figured out what you have to do and how long each step is going to take, we now can start assigning specific time slots to your tasks so that they actually get done. And this happens in the fourth P, which is the planning part, which is where we talk about the calendar. So plan is where we actually get out a calendar or planner and start using it, and using it religiously. I'm going to make the assumption that you actually have a calendar, whether it's paper or electronic, and whether you currently use it or not. There's a lot of conversation that could be had around calendars and around whether we use them, how often. I have clients, many clients who say they have it, their calendar, but they don't look at it. They don't use it. So if you're in that boat, don't feel badly about that. The one thing to remember, and this is a big, huge aha for many, many, many people, is that your to-do list is not your calendar. Your calendar/planner is something completely separate. Your to-do list is basically a dumpster of everything you have to do. It has not yet been prioritized. It has not yet been dismantled. It has not yet been worked through. And I hope that if you take one thing away today, and that's it, that will be a very big thing. So a well-used calendar or planner is really your roadmap, and it will serve as a foundation for your days and guide you to where you need to be. I did a research project called the PSCI with a psychologist a few years ago, and what we did was we gathered data to help people be more productive and less stressed. One of the areas we looked at was time management and productivity. No kidding. We surveyed over 225 business professionals to see where they stood in terms of crucial skills. And one of the initial findings that I found pretty amazing and highly relevant to what we're talking about today is that one, and I love this actually, is that one of the single best things you can do to improve productivity is don't agree to do anything until you identify the specific date and time you will do it. I'll repeat that again. So one of the single best things you can do to improve productivity is don't agree to do anything until you identify the specific date and time you will do it. And we found that people who do this are 41% more productive than those who don't. That was a statistically valid measurement. we found that people who do this are 41% more productive than those who don't. So since your actions and priorities have already been defined during the first 3 steps, you can now make firm decisions and commitments about what will get done and when. So nothing from that to-do list will be placed, as I was saying before, on the calendar randomly. So the calendar is all about commitment, 2 C's. The calendar is all about commitment. The to-do list is really all about wishful thinking, basically. And that's really important, and that's why I'm reiterating that point. So at the same time, remember that it's never going to be perfect, and you're never going to do it exactly as you planned. And so many of us are afraid of the calendar and afraid of putting things down there because we feel that we're not going to do them. Well, so what we do is we move them, because once they're on the calendar, they've already been prioritized. They've been processed. So they get on the calendar. So if something comes up, a meeting, a deadline, instead of letting that, whatever that commitment was, go into a black hole, I literally move it on my calendar. And that's how that works. So it's never going to be perfect. If you do it as planned, that's a beautiful thing, but it's usually not the way it is. The key is to begin to get into the habit of looking at and interacting with your planner many, many times throughout the day, always moving pieces around, updating, revising, because the contents are constantly churning and evolving all the time. And so it's not about perfectionism. It's not about being perfect here. It's about process and progress and incremental progress in the right direction, as I said before, and moving things. I had a thought about communication but that's a whole other subject. Very often, I'll just say a sentence or two about it, but very often when we're calendaring and we're working with this, it's very often to communicate with people when we're moving things around. It's really important to do that and to communicate with myself. And we have to know we're juggling all the time, and some of the balls we're juggling are glass, and some of the balls we're juggling are like rubber. So we have to always know what we're prioritizing, who we need to communicate with, what we need to do, where we need to cover our back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So planning at this level of detail may be a new discipline for most of you. And if you treat it as an experiment, as I'm saying, the discipline of the calendar can soon be internalized and become second nature. If you can improve on the time allotted to accomplish an action, that's great. But this is really not about racing to get more done. It's about slowing down, thinking through, and being realistic. So, for example, let's look back at the resume reviewing project we broke down a few minutes ago. So you set aside 5 hours to get it done, right? And you hadn't looked at the calendar yet. Yikes, you didn't know what 5 hours was going to look like on your calendar. But now that you're looking at your calendar, you can see the whole week laid out with other commitments you have, and you may not have 5 hours available. So now it's time to start making decisions about what is and is not going to get done so you can maintain or create sanity and manageability. So it's like triaging all the time. I always use the analogy of, God forbid, there was like a 5-car crash in the emergency room. Those people don't have too much time to think. It's coming at them fast and furiously, and they're implementing on a dime. And that's the kind of stuff that we need to get used to doing to sort of stay afloat and feel any kind of sense of completion in this crazy world we're living in today. So not everything gets on the calendar, or not everything even goes on the calendar. And that's why your to-do list, that's why a to-do list is a companion to your calendar, like a first cousin. Meaning that if I had to start, the question comes up a lot, is everything I have to do go on my calendar? No, it might be make calls, and on your to-do list might be 10 people you have to call, but you know, because you've sort of been rolled up your sleeves, you've been in the material that 1 hour schedule, make calls, you are referring to your to-do list, and you know what it is that you have, who you're going to call, because you're involved with this, you're churning this the information all the time. So back to calendars, it comes up also a lot. What type? Should I use electronic or paper planner? Many of us are visual learners, especially when we're challenged with managing time. So being able to see what your day and week look like might help you grasp the concept of time and helps you really understand how much of it you have available and how long your tasks will take. Generally, a paper planner, the low-tech, old-fashioned way, lying open on your desk, portable, is the easiest and best way to do that. So out of sight is very often out of mind for many of us, and having a tangible map of your day sitting right in front of you, I know it helps me keep on track when I might otherwise easily get distracted. This way, when people ask me to do things like we were talking about in that study, you don't automatically say yes. You check your calendar first to see when and if you can fit it in. When the phone rings, you don't automatically pick it up because you see that this is time you blocked out to work on a specific project. And that is a tactic for getting things done masterfully, that when something's on the calendar, we just have to create the discipline of not picking up that phone because we've blocked out. And again, nothing goes on the calendar by accident. So really for anyone who's distracted and overwhelmed, one-step processes are best. If I have to turn on my computer or open an app to get to my calendar, I feel I could maybe do 15 other things in the meantime. So why not make it easier? It's so funny. People whisper sometimes, I really like paper. And they feel like they're, since we're living in this technology age, that they should abandon the old-fashioned ways of doing things like using paper and pencils or pens. But I use a paper planner. I know a lot of very successful entrepreneurs and business professionals who do as well for all of these reasons that I'm mentioning. Because it works. Many, I would say 95% of my clients go back to paper to learn the skill, and it's what I encourage you to do too. It doesn't mean that electronic calendars aren't useful, of course, or sometimes even essential. Some people like a combination of both. The fact is, it's what is going to work for you, and what's important is that it's working, and meaning it's a support mechanism for you, and it's your go-to place for purposeful and good decision making all the time. So let's see now, where do we want to go? Very often in some companies today, they're using electronic calendar systems, but you might want to, where one client I had, there were meetings all day, every day, and we identified that at some point, people, and I'm sure many of you have this, where the calendars are open and people can just schedule on there. So she was crazed half the time, but what we realized what she had to do is go into her calendar and block out time so she could get her own work done, because everything was being managed for her, and that didn't work at all. So let me give you an example. If like on the calendar, if something has to move, you want to make an immediate decision about it. If it's just not a priority anymore and you've decided it's not going to get done, then delete it or knock it off your to-do list. If it must get done, can it be delegated? I want to show you now what this looked like for one client and how he used the 5P process to really get things done. So he was a marketing executive, VP brand manager, director of communications, and he came with a resume and lots of success, but had just gotten fired for the second time. Alongside the success was a lack of follow-through on projects, and he was experiencing an inability to listen to instructions. He was, not managing his time, and he was having trouble prioritizing. So he said he would start 3 projects and then get so focused on one that he would miss deadlines on the other 2. He also had little to no sense of how to plan out big projects or how long they were going to take. So he was always under the gun. He had a calendar, but having a calendar is one thing, using it is quite another. So what we did was we what we did was we began to look at his days as a finite amount of time. We ultimately delved into the specifics of what was stopping him on a practical level. And it turned out that he simply had no systems or means in place to know how to break things down, no sense of how to manage time. He committed to pausing to look at his calendar first thing every day, right when he got to his desk, before he turned on his computer. He learned how to process his list, to break things down. Instead of having job search on his to-do list, now he had all the components of the search on his list so he could execute on the baby steps and actually get it done. Since he was now using his calendar as a roadmap, he wasn't feeling overwhelmed. He was routinely taking things off of his to-do list and putting them on his calendar and using the calendar to navigate his days. So over time, he developed a much better sense of how long things took and how much time he actually had to do what he had to do. He wasn't cramming, he was realistic, and he knew that he had tools intuitively and skills to handle the tsunami. So the more he used them, the more intuitive it became. After the first month, he not only had a planner, but was using it. He did a job search in a focused way, showing up for appointments, not overbooking, and planning and prioritizing. The result was power, was peace of mind, and a lot of self-esteem. Not to mention, eventually, a great new job where he applied all these skills and had some sense of sanity with his new success. So if you embrace these principles of planning, you'll discover that the embarrassment at falling short of the mark, as in I intended to do it again but didn't, is no longer part of the equation. You move from living with great intentions but not such great follow-through to actually doing what you say you're going to do. I always like to say that a great intention without an action plan is really an exercise in futility. So the tools you're learning here and what we've talked about today are a lot. There's a lot, but there are a lot of tips, and they're the ones that will help you build realistic action plans that you can live and work with. And the last P is practice. So it's really practice being consistent over time with each of these steps to allow you to internalize them as ways of being. So whenever you get overwhelmed, here are some of the things we talked about. Do a brain dump. Take out a piece of paper and write down the things that you have to do in no particular order, and then read through it and identify what you have to do today. This allows you to re-engage your brain and enables you to stop and think clearly. Recognize and remember that your to-do list is not your calendar. It's merely a dumpster of everything, of a lot of your great intentions. It's like boogeymen looking at you until you've broken it down. Never, ever, this is just my suggestion, leave home without your calendar, your planner, have access to it. This means actually look at it every day and use it as if it were a living, breathing document, and it will become your best friend and means of comfort. And continue to move pieces. You know, you have scheduled when other things take priority. Don't just delete them. And you know, this whole business about stopping and thinking through what you need to do every single day until it becomes habit is probably one of the biggest takeaways that I would wish for everybody, to stop, to pause, to think through when you're just feeling so overwhelmed and overloaded. So here's a little exercise that we can do, and then we'll have a Q&A. We'll have a few minutes for a Q&A. And hopefully some of you will have some questions, and Carol can moderate that. Here's a little exercise to move your own agenda in the right direction. So it's about one thing. Just choose one thing that you've been procrastinating around that you perceive is not going to be so easy, and make a specific commitment now, right now, around the first step you're going to take and when you're going to take it. Then look at your calendar and ask someone to hold you accountable. And you will be so surprised at how that breaks the inertia. So choose one thing you've been procrastinating that you really perceive is not going to be so easy or you don't want to do for many reasons you've been procrastinating, and make a commitment around not the whole project but the first step and when you're going to take it and when. And ask somebody to hold you accountable. And that will help move your agenda in the right direction. So, okay. So we've walked through the process. These 5 Ps will help you get through the overwhelm and the panic so you can think more clearly, make choices that make sense for you, and get to the most important things on your list. I think Carol has a link, can put up the link for the download. You can download this 5P success guide at http://nancysnell.com/5-ps.com, and we have the slide, and it captures all of the essential points we've covered during the webinar in an easy-to-access format. This way, the next time you start feeling overwhelmed, you can just take out this guide and practice sheet and be reminded that there are solutions, and use it, as a reminder of some of the simple things that you can do to keep moving in the right direction. And finally, I want to thank you, Carol, and Direct Pay for hosting me, and most especially to everyone who has participated and taken the time out of your busy day to show up here. And congratulate you on giving yourself a chance to climb out of the overwhelm and into greater clarity, ease, and success. And that's my hope for you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nancy. And the first request that we had was just to repeat that URL, someone who is listening, and I also have typed it into the chat box so you can see it there. So it's http://nancysnell.com/5-PS. So that's for the 5 Ps. And yes, sorry, go ahead, Nancy.
Spelled right, 5, F-I-V-E dash P-S, as in 5 Ps. Peter,
Great.
S.
Thank you.
.com.
That's perfect.
We have the slide up, yes?
We do. We have the slide up, and I also put it into the chat box.
Watching.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Exactly.
You're right. Not everybody is online, watching it online.
Exactly.
Okay.
So a couple of questions that came up. One I think would be, I want to first of all thank you, Nancy, because I took a lot of notes. And one of the things that I noted and was at the very beginning was you said you may not get it all done. And I thought, what a great relief. Thank you. It's just to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah. Right.
And we had a question from Nikki in the audience about working from home.
Mm-hmm.
And just wondered if you have some additional tips about that. And
so working from home is challenging, right, because we don't have the external scaffold or the external structure. And as an entrepreneur, I'm making an assumption, right? So working from home, so it's about getting into some kind of a routine, meaning I get up and I get dressed as if I'm going to wherever I'm going, on a daily basis. And I just structure myself. I have a few things that are anchors in my day because it's very, very easy to say, okay, I have this day, I'm going to do blah, 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 and then at the end of the day get nothing done. And the stress of that is enormous. So my suggestion is to create a routine as if you had a job outside of the house. I've been working for myself for 10 years, and it's very challenging. It can be very challenging.
It can be. Agreed. Thank you. And another question, this is from Suzanne. Who are the best prospects for holding us accountable?
So that could be a spouse, a best friend, a colleague, a coach. I think any of those would be really, really good. Somebody that you trust, somebody that you know cares about you and about you moving ahead in the right direction and is going to be really honest with you. Somebody who's not going to let you off the hook. You need a person who's going to actually hold you accountable.
Good point. Thank you. And I had a question as well, Nancy. Do you, and you mentioned it a little bit, but I just wanted to clarify, do you personally calendar all your internal tasks or work that doesn't involve others in your day?
No, that's what I don't think we humanly could because there's not enough. We'd have to have calendars as big as the wall.
Right.
So, it's a matter of being always aware and familiar with the moving pieces, as I like to call them, right? And then some of them, the ones that I have to do, go onto the calendar. And that's why I'm working with the companion piece of my to-do list.
Right.
to refer to it. Because no, not everything I have to do can go on the calendar, but it's really about stopping and thinking and being very familiar with everything that I really have to do. And then I can be making choices all day, every day. It's a process of churning all the time.
I like
being very mindful and very purposeful.
Yes.
And realistic versus idealistic.
So
and that,
true.
You know, that, right? That goes back to the, speaking about the planning and breaking things down, like we were talking about the resumes. And how much time things actually take versus what I think they might take.
Right. And I like your X factor with adding 25% is a valuable tool.
Right. It's great.
Going to implement that one for myself right away.
Great.
And then
what will that do for you, Carol?
What will
that
do?
Do for you?
Well, it'll save me a great deal of frustration, because I am one of those people that jams my tasks on my calendar, or my appointments on my calendar, sometimes back to back. If I just build in 25%, that gives me that extra room for some flexibility. So.
Which is, you bring up such a great point. We need that.
Yes.
It's not sustainable. We're going to burn out. We can't go back to back to back, or meeting to meeting to meeting, and feel good about ourselves and feel productive and be our best selves for too long. It's just not sustainable. We're human.
Very
We're not
good
machines
point.
here.
Yes, absolutely true. One other question that came up is, do you transfer your paper calendar to electronic?
I personally do not.
Okay. And
I do not.
Do you have clients that do?
Yeah, I mean, there are some clients will use, say, their Outlook calendar and a paper planner.
Right.
So it's sort of what I was talking about it's an individual situation, and we each have to figure out what works for us. Many clients get distracted having to transfer because it's a two-step process. We have to open it up. We could do 45,000 things between now our intention to open up the calendar and not, versus if it's right in front of me and it's easily accessible and I'm looking at it all the time. However, I think it's a generational thing too.
Yes.
I think it's generational, and I think it's just very individual as to what people do, depending on time sense, and there's a big spectrum.
Yes.
Of what works.
Good point. And I know I have heard before the term using one capture tool rather than a dozen, because the overlap gets overwhelming.
Well, the overlap is not productive. And
No.
there's double work, and that is fodder for procrastination.
Yes.
And fodder for missing deadlines. So it all has to be one, I always like to say, a central command post. We have to have one central command.
Good point.
Where everything is, because it's one life.
Yes.
Right? So if we have something here and something there, how are we going to know when somebody wants to schedule a meeting if we can do it? If we have to go and look in two places, that doesn't work.
No, you're absolutely right.
That is not efficient.
No.
That's not an efficient way to go.
Very good point. And I'm not seeing any other questions from the audience, so perhaps we could just wrap up. Any last moment little pieces of brilliance for us, Nancy?
I would just say, be gentle with yourself as you're, learning this process, and just remember that your to-do list is not your calendar. It's just a dumpster. And until you start prioritizing and breaking things down, it's all about baby steps. And just remember to ask yourself, remember to pause.
Yes.
And to stop and to think when you're feeling so overwhelmed. Just stop, as opposed to go faster, slow down.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I've put a slide up as well about how you can reach Nancy at nancysnell.com, and her telephone number is on the slide as well. And as I mentioned to someone who had asked, the presentation today has been recorded, and you will get a copy of the link to that recording from the wonderful people at Direct Pay. So I want to thank you, Nancy, for a nice, clear 5 steps that I can start implementing right away. As I had shared with you
Terrific.
previously, this is a topic dear to my heart and to a number of my clients as well. So thank you so much for all of the wonderful information you've provided us with. And thank you to everyone who spent time with us today and listening to this presentation and watching. And thank you to Direct Pay for sponsoring it and bringing us wonderful people like Nancy to assist us with our tsunamis as we go throughout our time. So thank you,
Thank you,
Nancy, again.
Carol.
Have a
Thanks, my
wonderful day.
pleasure.
Okay.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.